Hello again. This video I'd like to go over some settings tips, two different scenarios for people with lower end PCs. One setting is for the people who want a higher, smoother frame rate and don't mind sacrificing some of the visual bells and whistles. Let's call this performance. The other setting, let's call it quality, is for the best graphical experience without really dropping below 30 frames per second. An acceptable, playable frame rate while still having a good looking game without too much lag. The computer I'm using is a 5-year-old MSI laptop with a GTX 980M. I'll list the full specs for this system in the description below the video. Anyone with this card or lower should benefit from adjusting some of these settings. I'll also have the frames per second counter in the upper left hand side of the screen so you can see the effect these settings have on the frame rate. First, let's go over the performance tips for those with really low-end computers. The first thing you can consider lowering is your overall screen resolution. This will make your game a little more blurry as it downscales the image quality, but it drastically affects your performance in a positive way. If this loss of quality is okay with you, I would suggest lowering it to a resolution with the same aspect ratio, so you get a full screen and don't experience the black bars at the top and bottom of your screen. My highest setting down from my native 1920 by 1080 is 1366 by 768, and I do see a big performance difference when I use this lower setting. Additionally, I can lower it to 1280 by 720 for an even better performance boost. I would only recommend doing this if you still have under 30 frames per second and a noticeable lag even with all of the settings on the lowest. Otherwise, keep your native resolution. Once you've decided on your screen resolution, the first thing you need to do is set everything to its lowest settings. I know this sucks, but to be honest, even at its lowest settings, Cyberpunk 2077 is still a good looking game. This includes the crowd size, texture resolution, as well as all the dynamic effects such as shadows, ambient occlusion, subsurface scattering, etc. Just to note, the only time you can set your texture resolution is in the main menu screen before you load the game. Otherwise, this option won't be visible in the settings. If you are at the lowest you can go, and are still below a playable frame rate, you can always take advantage of the Dynamic Fidelity FX setting. This will drop your resolution on the fly while you're playing if it hits an area that causes your frame rate to drop. First, you need to set the target frame rate you want to achieve, and then set the amount it can downscale to. To make the most of the setting, you'll have to try a few tests to see how low you have to go to hit your targeted frame rate. This can help out quite a bit, but I notice it produces a bit of lag sometimes when sprinting the camera around too quickly. Not good for action scenes when in combat. You may have to make some visual sacrifices to achieve a playable game, but these lower settings can help you have a lag-free experience. Now let's move on to the quality settings for those who want to have a good looking game as well as a decent playable frame rate. First thing is keep your native resolution. Anything lower than what your screen is capable of will lower the overall quality and looks awful in my opinion. If you're on a 980M or higher GPU, you really shouldn't have to lower this from 1920 by 1080. I have the crowd size set to full on. I've gone back and forth on this setting, but I decided I wanted a populated looking city. You can drop this if having lots of pedestrians around isn't really important to you. For the graphics settings, I would put the textures on either medium or high, depending on your rig. I have mine set to high as good looking surface textures are really important to me. I've kept most of the settings on low, but the two settings I do bump up a bit are local shadow quality and ambient occlusion. I have the local shadow quality set to medium. Off is a no-go for me personally, and low is too jaggy at the edges. This gives me a nice shadow quality without sacrificing too much playability. I have ambient occlusion set to low. For me, off really washes out the lighting of the game, and low gives me a good look without being too heavy on my system. If the FPS you are getting with these settings is too low for you to find playable, I would recommend looking at the Dynamic Fidelity FX settings again. I found setting a target frame rate of either 35 FPS and set the resolution to 90%, or a target of 40 frames per second with the resolution at 80% to work pretty well. I don't use the dynamic fidelity myself because of the laggy feel, and I'm usually above the 30 FPS that I find playable. Whatever settings you do wind up with are really a matter of personal taste, whether you want performance or quality or trying to hit a balance between the two. And remember, what you have for settings today will change over time as CDPR tweaks the game, and perhaps even when performance mods start to become available. Either way, the performance we are getting now will only get better with time. Anyways, I hope this video has helped you either achieve a better frame rate or an overall better looking graphical experience. I also hope you're enjoying the game as much as I am and are focused more on the positives of this awesome game. For more on that, I recommend checking out my other video on the controversy over the rough launch of Cyberpunk. I'll leave a link to it below in the description. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.